Okay, Linnea, you can go ahead and start. 7 o'clock.
Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to a nice rainy April evening for our Menomonee Falls Camera Club. Tonight I'm really excited for Ian's program on the flowers. I saw so many great orchid photos. So I would like to learn how to do this. So tonight's going to be a good night. Looking at the agenda, we have show and tell. Tonight it's just going to be Patty. So Patty, you can go first because unfortunately Sid, who is also on the schedule, was not going to be able to, or unfortunately can't make it with us tonight. The slideshow tonight, lights and shadows, some really cool photos that I saw. Jeff, I was really excited to see in the newsletter tonight is also spring election for next year. Wow, okay.
Well, yeah, it's next month would be the spring election, not this month. Today's April, right? Today's regular election day, but maybe it would have been a good day, except we don't have anybody for the offices yet. So today's the day that I plead for somebody to volunteer.
Right.
And then we will, June. God, I'm so messed up. I've had a weird week. Yeah, June we still meet by Zoom. So it would be in June that we hold the election. But we need to let everybody know next month who it is.
Okay.
Or what people it may be.
Well, before we
that was clear as mud.
I know, that. I was jumping ahead of everything. Zoo trip. Brian, I was unable to join you. Hopefully I will soon be able to. How did the zoo trip go? The field trip?
Well, Brian was consumed with getting his wife home from rehab, so Ken volunteered to take over. So Ken, I'll let you tell how that went.
Well, maybe I should have John participate also, since basically it was just John Wiley and myself at the zoo, and we had a great time together. It was that one day that they had all those wind threats that they were forecasting, and turned out it didn't affect us in any way. In fact, it also turned out to be a warm day. So besides shooting into buildings, we also photographed some of the outdoor scenes because it turned out to be very nice. So, it worked out very well. And John, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, I agree. It was a great time. The weather was great. The animals, most of them were up doing things, so moving around. But yeah, wish others could have joined us, but Ken and I took advantage of the weather and had a good time.
John, I saw your photos on Facebook, and the emotions that you captured on some of those animals' faces were just incredible. I mean, I love animals, so I probably read into it, but I just loved your shots. They're great.
Yeah, I like to get up close sometimes with it because I do like the animals' expressions, but it was a good day.
And Brian, there is another one scheduled for outdoor in early June, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I think that's the end of May. Or no, is it early June?
We can talk about that next month along with the elections. I'm just glad there's another one.
Well, in between, we've got Shady Lane. So Ian's program tonight will just be perfect and as a setup and get us ready for Shady Lane. So.
And speaking of my talk today, is there any chance I could give it before all our other stuff tonight?
Absolutely.
Would that be okay? I unfortunately have a conflict later tonight, so I'm all here for the presentation and everything, but then I'm probably gonna have to duck out afterwards. So if we could do it first, that'd be fantastic.
I have nothing pressing on my list. Jeff, was there anything pressing on yours, or should we just give the floor to
No,
Ian?
no,
No.
that's fine.
Please
Cool.
take it away, Ian. Thank
I
you.
greatly appreciate it. So let me share my screen. Oh, the joys of sharing screens on Zoom. All right, let me know. Let's see. Wow. You seeing the pink flower right now?
Yep, yep.
Okay, awesome. Then let me share my presentation. And now you should be seeing creating pretty flower photos.
Yep.
Awesome. All right. So this is, as you mentioned, we're going to Shady Lane Nursery coming up. This photo on the cover here was taken there actually last year. So this is my presentation on creating pretty flower photos. I'm not going to stick on this page. Just about everybody here knows who I am. I've got this title in here for when I give it to other clubs and whatnot. But if you don't know who I am, my name's Ian Dickmann, and gosh, I don't know how many years I've now been with this club, but it's been a while. And ever since COVID, I really got into flower photography. So I'm going to just kind of skip over this though. And yeah, go right into why flowers? Why do I, since COVID, probably about 50%, maybe even more than that, of my photography has been focused on flower photography. I always shot flowers, but it was just kind of like something I dabbled on. We'd go to Shady Lane, I'd shoot there, but that was really about it. And then during COVID, you couldn't go in the big cities, which is usually what I was doing, and being around a lot of people and shoot urban stuff. So what I really found that I enjoyed was I liked spending time in nature. I liked getting out there. I appreciate the fact that all the shots are temporary. So sometimes you'll do like a landscape shot of a landmark. Well, those landmarks tend to be static and be the same, versus every flower photo you take is temporary. That flower is going to wither away at some point in time. Could be days, could be later that day if a storm comes through. So it's kind of neat to capture those moments. I also enjoy the flowers because I think it's easy to overlook them sometimes. I'll get into different types of flowers that you can shoot, but you are, getting really up close with the subject and possibly seeing in a way that nobody else sees it or has ever. You may be the only person who ever even sees that flower, so that's kind of neat. And then I approach them as tiny portraits. They are the subject, just as if I was photographing a person. A lot of the ideas, the composition aspects of that apply here. It's just they tend to be small. And then lastly, availability. Flowers are everywhere typically. Sure, winter, Wisconsin, excuse me, there aren't a ton of them outside, but we have the domes, for example. We're doing Shady Lane, which will be great. And then in the summer, they literally are just about everywhere. Backyards, public areas where they get planted, wildflowers, etc. So what am I going to talk about here? Basically, three sections. I'm going to talk about gear. I'm going to talk about kind of the philosophy of how I shoot, and then some of the techniques. And a quick disclaimer, this is basically just the way that I have learned to do things over time. I've learned from a lot of amazing photographers, and I've kind of plucked pieces from what they do and integrated into my own type of workflow. But by no means is this the only way to do things. I think that's the key, is to find what works for you and see presentations like this and learn some things that maybe you've never given a try them and see if that improves your photography and, makes it more enjoyable and ultimately a better product. So my gear, my stuff. I shoot with a A7 IV Sony full frame camera. It's on a 90 millimeter 2.8 macro lens, and that is like 99% of my flower photography is with that setup. I do also have a A67, which is a crop sensor APS-C camera. And that one typically has my 70 to 350 telephoto on it, which I typically will use that for water lilies because they're just too far away for the 90 millimeter. Or if there's just a flower too far away that I want some reach, then I'll go to the telephoto. So that like 1% or less than 1% of the flowers that I take will be with that setup. And then I've gotten more and more in the habit of using circular polarizing filters. They help with the glare, they help bring out some of the vibrance. You do lose a little light with them, which can sometimes be challenging, especially the way I shoot flowers, and we'll get in that. But I like how they really saturate and really remove those glares. They're a must if you're shooting water lilies because they're in water and you can get rid of some of that glare, or you can control how much glare there is by twisting the filter and adjusting how much polarization you're using. And then lastly, ever since I went to Phoenix, I've now been wearing a wide brim hat when I photograph flowers, even if I really don't need it, just because it increases my shadow. And as I'll talk about here, I shoot a lot in my shadow when the sun's out. But things I consider non-essential, number one is a tripod. And I know a lot of people who shoot flowers really get stuck on a tripod and it's how they like to shoot it. And, that's fine. But I never use a tripod for flowers. I find hand holding frees me up to manipulate the camera and move around and get inside, around the flowers, above the flowers, sometimes behind the flowers. I will hold my camera behind over, like reach over a flower and shoot back sometimes. That I just can't do with a tripod. I find the tripod slows me down. It restricts my creativity. So I personally don't use one. I don't use a diffuser. Instead, I just rely on my shadow, basically, and then the ambient light around me. Mostly because, again, if I don't have a tripod, it's hard to hold a diffuser and a camera at the same time. It's not impossible. I've done it, but it's not really enjoyable. I don't shoot flash because I don't like harsh light. And every time I've ever used the flash, it just adds more shadows than I want. I know there's rigs with multiple flashes, but even then, I don't like the look of it, so I prefer natural light. And then extension tubes, they're great if you want to get into macro photography, but they have some drawbacks, especially they struggle if you shoot with autofocus. Autofocus tends to struggle with extension tubes turned on. It'll work, but it's not great. And ultimately, I have a macro lens, so I prefer to use the macro lens. And then I just threw on here Plamp and the backgrounds. The Plamp is the curly thing on the right there. You can use that to like hold a flower and stuff like that. I bought it many years ago. I used to use it, and now I just don't find the need to it. And again, I don't have a tripod, so I don't really have anything to clamp it to. Less gear for me is usually better. I want to be free. I want to be able to move around. And then the last one is backgrounds. I never shoot with backgrounds. A lot of gardens don't let you bring in backgrounds. They don't want you that close to flowers or reaching into flowers with that and possibly damaging them. And to me, part of the challenge of shooting the flowers is getting that background, that clean or distraction-free background in the first place. So I just don't use them, and I make that a challenge. So that's my gear. Pretty straightforward. Get it out of the way. But let's talk philosophy. So first thing, primary ways to improve. Number one, and this really goes for all photography, is just get out there and shoot. The more you do it, the more experience you're going to get, the more mistakes you're going to make, the more things you're going to learn, and the better your photography is going to be. Like I said, I kind of just dabbled in flower photography before COVID. And once COVID hit, it like consumed me. And my flower photography improved dramatically because I was doing it a lot. So get out there and shoot. If it's frustrating early on, just know that's part of the process. The more you do it, the better you're going to get at it. And then kind of going hand in hand with that is to learn your camera. It sucks when you get out there and you don't know what's going on with your camera, or you don't know what the buttons are doing or the settings. And part of that is just trial and error, trying different settings and learning where the buttons are, and if you can customize buttons, getting them the way you like it. But you don't know what you like until you do it, so you have to just kind of struggle through that and play with it. But the nice part is, once you get your camera set up the way you like it, it kind of gets it out of the way. Like, I can change my settings, I can change my aperture, I can change my exposure compensation without looking at my camera. Because I like my aperture, I know how many rolls of the dial, clicks of the dial will move me from f2.8 to f4 or 5, 6, or 8. So sometimes I just change that without even looking at it. I just know that I've put it into the right aperture. And that just purely comes from doing it enough times and being comfortable with it. And by getting that out of the way, it frees you up to be more creative and to ultimately take the pictures you're looking for. Other ways to improve that I've improved over years is through YouTube, watching videos. There are great videos on your camera. For example, if you just plop in your camera and type guide for YouTube, you'll find people who do full tutorials on your camera, so you can learn what all the different settings are. When I bought my A7 IV, I watched a video that literally went through every single setting and explained why they set various things certain ways, and explained to me how to use it. So like within, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes, I understood a lot of my camera, which is great. Conferences, getting out there with other people, instructors, that has dramatically boosted my photography and confidence in my photography. And then photo clubs like this. I mean, I knew almost nothing when I first joined this camera club. I definitely wasn't shooting in Lightroom or editing in Lightroom or shooting in RAW or any of that stuff when I joined the club. And I slowly just learned piece by piece through presentations like this, and worked my way up in my photography. Practice editing as much as shooting. I really can't stress enough how important improving your editing skills can improve your photography. I have this big philosophical thing that, like, shooting is just harvesting the raw materials, but editing is refining them into the finished product. So if you are awesome at shooting the pictures in the first place, but bad at editing them, you basically have an unfinished piece of work. Like, it may still be a very nice picture, but it could be so much more if you can just refine it into that final product. And vice versa, you can only edit a photo so much. If you take lousy photos that are out of focus or just completely poorly composed, there's only so much you can do to editing to make a good photo. So they really go hand in hand. And I just think sometimes it gets a little overlooked. So don't ignore that part. And then the last two, experiment and try things. That's I especially new things coming on Lightroom. I just try them and see what happens and figure out how I want to include them or not include them. And lastly, shoot in RAW. That was a huge thing for me, was understanding the benefits of shooting RAW, the extra light that you get out of RAW, the extra adjustments, the color adjustments you can do in RAW. Is really nice. And it's great because anytime I start shooting RAW in like 2010, and I can still go back today and I can reprocess those now with all the new tools that I have 15 years later, it's really nice. So focus on making art. This is another thing that, like, I like to stress, and I've learned over the years, is this is the way I shoot flowers is art. I'm not here for photojournalism. I like photojournalism. It's just not what I'm usually shooting for. So this example here, this little bud down here on the bottom corner, I couldn't shoot the ranunculus without that little guy getting in the way, not with the background that I was looking for and the angle of the flower, but by rotating the image, I found the composition I liked better than when I took the image. And the drawback was by rotating it, I no longer had these corners, but thanks to content aware fill type things, and now Adobe's got even better fill techniques since I've taken this. You can just fill in these blank gaps. Now, I focus on art. I would obviously not submit this in like wacko nature. It's not allowed. And I would never pretend that I don't do these things to my images. Like I would also take out dust spots and stuff like that, or if there's like dirty spots on the flower, I might take those out. But the point I'm trying to stress is like I'm trying to make a pretty flower or a pretty image at the end of the day. And if there are distracting elements or things that restricted my composition, I'm not afraid to use the tools that I have to finish the image or to change the image slightly to get that. I'm ultimately producing the image of the ranunculus that I took, but there are some manipulation that I do in a lot of the photos, with the exception of the ones that I obviously submit to competitions that have rules. So once you get into the garden, though, the number one thing I would recommend is get the obvious shots out of the way first. You get into a garden or wherever you are, really, it doesn't have to be a garden, anywhere, field of flowers, backyard, whatever. Just get the obvious shots out of the way. Top down, straight on, the big bushy flower that catches your eye. Just go shoot it and get out of the way. Because if you ignore it and you're trying to shoot something else, it's going to be like calling to you and telling you, come take a picture of me. And I've taken a ton of top-down shots like this daisy. And yet every time I see a daisy, I want to go take another top-down shot of this daisy. It builds up your confidence. It keeps you, it builds up your confidence, and it kind of like gets you moving in the right direction. It's also great because now you've got like a good photo probably already banked in your memory card. So if like in 5 minutes it starts raining or thunderstorming or it gets super windy and you have to stop taking photos, you already got some. But then by getting those obvious shots out of the way, you can move on to trying to take more creative shots. So like the water lily on the left here, that was taken at a conference at Chicago Botanic. We've been shooting water lilies all afternoon. It was in the afternoon. And I kind of had hit a point where like I'd shot all of them from a whole bunch of angles that I was used to. And I'd gone around circles a bunch of times. And then I decided to just kind of like get down low in a certain spot. And I found this creative angle where the reflection was very colorful off the water because there were some flowers on a ledge behind it, behind the little fountain that these things are in. And because I got low, I got the reflection of the flower itself. So I just got this creative angle that I tend to find those things pop out after I get all the like basic obvious ones out of the way and kind of like start to think like, okay, now that I've got that, how do I take it a step further? How do I find those hidden shots that are lurking out there? Or the tulip in the middle. I shot a bunch of tulips at a local farm in Germantown. And after shooting more traditional tulip shots from a little bit further back, as I got closer and closer, I started to realize there were reflections of tulips in the water droplets. So then I started to play with that and get more creative with that. It's not something I would necessarily just walk up to a tulip and be like, I'm going to do this. You kind of had to find that, and by moving in closer and trying new things, that's how I found it. And then the one on the right is actually from a desert garden. Everyone was shooting, more traditional cactus shots. They were all, we were at this like botanic place that had cactus everywhere. And I was just like walking along, looking at things. I wasn't necessarily shooting at that time, but I was just kind of seeing what was around me. And I saw these like tall, skinny, fuzzy plants that lined up really nicely and had some color textures to them. So just kind of like, again, because I had already shot everything else, it's like it wasn't distracting anymore, and I could find the things in between those, the parts that jump out at you. And then seek out the characters. This is something Alan Shapiro, somebody who I've learned immensely from, loves to point out. He personifies all sorts of flowers. So like this one on the left reminds me of like Sideshow Bob from The Simpsons with his crazy hair. The dandelion in the middle, these I always think of these as like punk rock dandelions because they have like mohawks going on. And then this clematis, there we go, had like bunny ears almost because it only had two petals coming off of it. And seeking out the characters is a great way to make your photos stand out, be unique. You know, there's a million round dandelions. And yes, there are tons of dandelions that are cut in half, but usually when you see a photo, you see a nice fully round one. Or the clematis, you'll see a full clematis. But seeking out those characters gives a way for your photos to be unique, be inviting. Somebody's gonna be like, "Oh, that's kind of neat. I haven't seen that before." So yeah, personifying them is kind of fun way of going about it. And then along those lines, imperfect flowers are pretty too. I like to find the damaged flowers because again, they're unique. They're not the flower that everyone's going to see, that they're used to seeing. You know, this flower in the front, because it was missing petals, you get to see the whole inside that you normally wouldn't. The flower on the right, because it's missing the petals, I can make this nice 4x6 frame where the flower fills up the whole image, and get the, you know, the center of the flower off to the rule of thirds, that type of thing, off to the side. It kind of balances it out nicely. Versus if it had all the petals, I'd either have to, you know, I'd either have to center compose this, or I'd have to chop, you know, just like crop out some of the petals. But in this case, I have the whole flower, what remains of the flower, in the image. So don't be afraid to look for those damaged or imperfect flowers. And don't overlook the weeds. Everybody here probably knows that I love photographing dandelions. They're everywhere. They bloom multiple times a year. They're kind of my in-between flowers. So in between tulips and summer flowers, I go shoot dandelions. And just anytime that I'm like, you know what, it's a nice day, let's go photograph. And I don't feel like going to a garden or seeking out more traditional flowers, I'll go find dandelions. They're also great for when it's windy because they're really low to the ground. You can just like kind of cover them yourself by sitting next to them, and then they don't move around on a windy day. So if you want to shoot flowers on a windy day, go photograph dandelions or clover. Clover, I go on hikes. Clover's everywhere. But when you get really up close, you know, it looks like flames coming off this clover, plus the little heart in the middle, the upside down heart. And they come in different colors, pinks and purples and whites. So yeah, don't think you always have to be photographing a dahlia or a daisy or roses. Like you probably in a few weeks you'll have weeds everywhere. Yeah, what's up?
Something that I learned recently is that dandelions are the first source of food for bees. And
Oh
if
yeah.
you kill them or pick them or mow them, whatever, bees don't survive.
Yeah, Menomonee is a fun time for me. I know some people don't like Menomonee and other people love it. I love it. I think yards look great when they're all shot up yellow and whatnot. Apologies to those who have allergies, myself included. I'm allergic to a lot of plants, which is a great irony. but I think they look great. I go to River's Edge here in Menomonee Falls because the village tends to be late on mowing that grass, for example. And I can usually go out there and it's just an entire field full of dandelions. And like when you have that many subjects out there, you've just like endless possibilities to play around. Like it's just like, where do I want to go sit down? Like that's all I have to do is sit down in one place, and I've got a ton of photos I can take. So, and then again, it's like, all right, the challenge is how do I make a creative photo with all these subjects? So, and a little, I know, this is a philosophical and a technical comment on this one. High ISO can be a friend, not an enemy. Noise reduction is amazing these days. I noticed some awesome zoo photos recently that I'm just guessing you ran through noise reduction because I've tried to shoot some of those apes and the lighting is terrible. And it's amazing what noise reduction does nowadays. And when it comes to flowers, it really helps a lot too. I will shoot, basically, I shoot on auto ISO almost all the time. And I usually shoot like ISO 400 to ISO 8000. And a lot, I mean, a high percentage of my flower images are from ISO 8000. And the reason is I'm shooting handheld and I want to shoot at a fast shutter speed because I am shooting handheld. And also, not just because I'm handheld, but the flower is typically wiggling in the wind or the breeze, or even on a still day, it's moving a little bit. And then my hands aren't the steadiest, so my camera's moving around. So I want to shoot like 1/500th of a second, 1/250th of a second is like my minimum that I want to be shooting. I do have to sometimes go below that, but like if it's a sunny day, it's usually 250 or 500 at a minimum. So I just crank up the ISO, and Adobe Lightroom's noise reduction is amazing, and it just cleans it all up for me afterwards. I don't feel like I lose any detail out of it. So yeah, don't be afraid. I used to never shoot anything over like ISO 800, and it was so limiting. And then now I pretty much don't worry about it. And while I've shown a bunch of flowers and talked about going to gardens, you don't need to go to a garden. Um, these were all taken right around my house. The dandelions were taken like behind a vet on a back street next to my house. So I was on an outdoor walk and they're like amongst the gravel and stuff. And it was just good light, good afternoon, and soft light, and got the dandelion photo. The Queen Anne's lace is in the parking lot by St. Anthony's, which is across the street from my condo. Way back by the cemetery, there's some Queen's Anne lace that grows back there, and I took that on just a day where it was like sun was going down, the light looked nice. And I hopped out for, a half hour, walked across the street and took some pictures. And the buttercup on the right is taken by the creek that's behind my condo. We get some buttercups in the early spring. And I went down there and took that picture. So you don't have to go far. You don't have to have a world-renowned garden. You don't have to go to Chicago Botanic, for example. Of course, the gardens are amazing and your opportunities are basically endless when you go to them. But you can, realistically, light is catching good light and just being able to go in your backyard for a few minutes and just relax and enjoy yourself can be just as fun, if not more fun.
Ian.
Yeah.
I couldn't get to my microphone fast enough on the last segment.
No, it's okay.
Now you said you shoot between 250 and 500.
Yeah.
Of a second. Okay.
At a minimum.
Okay. So does that mean you're shooting manual because of your aperture?
No, I'll shoot on aperture mode. I control my aperture. You
do? Okay. Yep. So how can you get up to 500 on there? Because usually when you set the aperture.
Yep. So I'm shooting at anywhere from typically f2.8 up to f8 is usually the highest I go for flowers. There's times where I might push that. So I'm shooting between those apertures. And because I set my ISO to be auto, as I push those up and I need more light, the ISO just goes up. So That's why I said I shoot a lot at ISO 8000.
I
And
understand.
sometimes it does go below 1/250th of a second, but a lot of times that's enough because I'm shooting, it's bright out, the sun's out, stuff like that. I'm shooting in my shadow typically, but it's still bright enough that I can shoot at those speeds.
Okay, because sometimes I'll just do it manually, but
Yeah.
But-
I mean, I just control, like I said, I just adjust the aperture because as I'll talk, I play with the aperture as my primary tool for creativity. So,
okay, thanks.
yep. And then going along with that, you don't need a garden. Here's just an example that there are images everywhere. This dandelion was in next to my condo, and this is the dandelion right here. Those are my feet. And I just got really low, literally like into the leaves, shot through them. That's why you kind of have this haze look down here, is that they're blurred out. And I got even with the flower and got the little curls. That's what I focused on, was the curls, and took the picture. So yeah, my backyard. And then another tip that I like is and this is coming up real soon here, is the photograph before peak bloom. So tulips are my primary example, even though I have a ranunculus and a lotus here. But tulips, I don't really shoot any tulips once they fully bloom. To me, they're just kind of a tulip at that point. They all look the same to me. But when they're coming up, they're still curled up in their leaves. The color's just starting to come through. There's lots of curves and lines and curls. This one doesn't have curls. The curls are what I'm usually looking for, is as these leaves unfurl. They kind of have these spirals and such. So kind of my tip is like, don't think like, oh, the tulips are still, they haven't bloomed yet. I don't see the big bulb popped up there. Get out there early and check them out before they open up. The lotus, I mean, a lotus is amazing open too. But a lotus can be pretty interesting. You get this dark purple around here and the color and the veins in it before it opens. So yeah, get out there. That's going to be soon. Tulips are about a month away here, less than a month. And then I kind of talked, I'm not going to stick on this because I kind of touched on it earlier, but create a finished product. The image on the left is what came out of camera. The image on the right was the process. You can see I, boost the brightness of it, played with the color a little bit. So the orange pops a little bit more. I cropped it tighter. But this is what I mean. Like this is the raw materials that I captured. I had to get it, straight, and I focused here on the center. If I screwed up the focus, there's no going back really. And then I post-processed it and finished it. And then the last section, the last slide that I have on kind of the philosophical stuff, is to be respectful. I see people in gardens, stepping into the garden, picking flowers, damaging flowers. I've seen photographers, you kind of get in your own world, which is understandable and enjoyable. But at the same time, like I've seen people at the Chicago Botanic Garden do that, while the crew who is taking care of the garden is trying to work around them, and their bags are in the way or whatever. Like, so just be mindful of where you are. If you go into nature, into the wildlife, wildflowers, don't damage them. Don't sit there and prune them off or whatever. Dandelions, yeah, I'll pick some blades of grass to get out of my way for a dandelion because it's going to get mowed in a day anyway. But if you're in a garden or you're at a park or something, be mindful of that. Also be mindful, like if you do go to a garden, there's other people visiting who would like to see the flowers too. So it's easy to kind of be monopolizing some dahlias, for example. So just be aware of your surroundings. All right, so on to some techniques. I've touched on some of these, but this is kind of the rundown. I shoot handheld, and I've kind of mentioned that's because I like to move quickly. I like to be free. I can move close to a flower, away from the flower, up, down, all over, in space, very, very quickly handheld. I shoot on continuous autofocus. I'm terrible with a manual focus, even with the focus peaking. It's not my bread and butter. And what I find is autofocus nowadays on the new cameras is so fast, it tracks so quick that I just use the little focus point and move it around my frame. If I know I want to put the center of the flower, on the left third, for example, then I'll put my center point in the left third of my frame. And then I just line up my shot with that autofocus point right in the middle of the image or the flower. And I take my photo. If I want the focus to be up in the top left, then that's where I'll put my focus point, and then I'll compose my image. I actually put my focus point where I want to compose, where I want the eye to go in my image first, and then I line up my shot with the flower. A lot of times what I'll do is I actually shoot the flower straight on first, review it on my image and be like, okay, but I'm going to put that in the top left or the bottom right or wherever. And then I reshoot it again with my autofocus where it is. And then the continuous autofocus just, stays on that part that's sharp, even though I might be rocking back and forth a little bit or the flower's swaying a little bit. I try, if it's swaying, then obviously you kind of got to move the camera to nail it. It might take a couple tries, but it's usually not too bad. And then, yeah, I tend to get in focus. The last piece that I have on this list, I'll jump over to it, is chimping, which is reviewing the back of your camera. I believe it's called chimping because you look at the back of all your images, and you're constantly going, ooh, 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 like a chimp. And it's not that I want to like sit there and be like, ooh, look at my photos, they're amazing. It's more, I'm just looking at my images repeatedly after taking a couple of them, just to make sure, did I nail that focus? Did I get the composition I was looking at? Was there something in the background that I missed that when I was looking through my viewfinder, I just didn't realize, oh, there's a twig back there or something, or a hot spot or something. So I am constantly reviewing my images. I touched on compose, focus, then frame. That's where I put the point and then I frame it up. I use my shadow, so I hate direct light on any of my subjects. I basically never shoot anything in direct sunlight. Either it's overcast, and then I can shoot pretty much from any angle, or it's sunny out, and I will only shoot whatever is already in the shade due to a tree or a wall or whatever. Or I use my shadow. So I will just stand over it or in front of it, cast my shadow on the flower, and then take the picture. And I have an example coming up of why I do that and the difference that you get out of that. And then aperture bracket. So this is where I will shoot like this exact same image at f2.8, f4, f5.6, and f8 and compare them. And sometimes I just know up front from experience, like f8's not going to work because the background, whatever, this image isn't a good example, but a different image, the background might be too busy at f8. So I don't even shoot the f8 because I can tell by like f6 it's too busy. Because the higher the number you get, the more you're going to get in focus, or at least less out of focus. And then the smaller the number, the shallower depth of field you're going to have. So I'll shoot all of those because I can kind of tell on the back of the camera which I like, but really it's not until I get back into Lightroom and see it on a big screen that I can determine which one I want to keep. So a lot of times if there's a photo that I know, like this is a pretty good photo, I like this photo, then I'll just shoot in all that brackets, all the apertures, those jumps. I tend to shoot those, the 2.8, the 4, the 5.6, and the 8, because each of those is a full stop. And I'll be honest though, f4 is like my go-to aperture. If you told me I could only shoot in one aperture, it's going to be f4. On my 90mm macro lens, it's very sharp at f4. It's the right amount of depth typically. There are obviously cases where I shoot at f2, f6, f8, or else I wouldn't do it in the first place. But that's a lot of times that's the one I go with. And then I just change angles and distance. I move around the flower. I try different things out. I kind of just like coming up on that right now, in fact. Try different angles and distances. So this was taken at Bookworm Gardens up in Sheboygan. And I don't think these are all the same flower, although I think 3 of them are the same flower. They're all right next to each other. And I just walked up to this dahlia, and this one shot from the kind of the bottom left angle. This one I shot similarly, but a little bit farther back, maybe a little bit more down to the left because it's more coming straight in instead opposed to like a 45-degree angle. The center shot, and then I shot from the right side, changing things up and getting under these curled here. So you just kind of come in, you try different angles, you try different distances. I tend to start farther back and then just work my way closer to the subject until I've gotten so close. I'm just like, yeah, at this point, I'm either can't focus any closer or you can't really tell what it is, and there's no point getting any closer. Here's the shadow one. So I intentionally shot the one on the left in the sunlight, which, like I said, I never do this, but for demonstration purposes, I did. And the one on the right, what I did was I took my hat off and I just held it up in front of the flower while I shot with my right hand. So I hold my camera with my right hand, hold my hat with my left hand, take the picture. Thanks to autofocus and a high shutter speed, I can pull it off one-handed. But you'll notice these harsh shadows around the edges go away and you get a much softer, in my opinion, more pleasant image out of that. And I didn't do any like further processing of this. I would have processed this further. For example, I would have taken out this dark spot here. But I just wanted to show you purely what the shade does to an image and how it gives you a better starting point than shooting in the harsh, bright sunlight. And then shoot wide, then crop. I would rather shoot an image wider than I need to and then crop into it than shoot too tight and wish I had shot. You saw the one earlier. I started off when I was talking about doing art that I had to add the corners back in because I didn't have enough to rotate it. It's better to shoot a little bit farther back and then just crop into what you want, because maybe this is a 4x6. Maybe I want an 8x10. So it's going to be slightly different. And if I just take this 4x6 and turn it 8x10, then I'm going to have to cut off these pieces. Versus when it's wider like this, I can get an 8x10 out of this without sacrificing the main subject of the image. It also can provide more depth. There's a whole bunch of mathematical reasons behind that, but basically the way to think of it is the closer the subject is to you, to the camera, the shallower the depth of field you'll get at that current setting, whatever your camera is currently set at. Versus if you get closer to, if you get closer to it, you'll get shallower depth of field. If you back up, you'll get more depth of field. And then you can, crop on top of just, making 8x10. Maybe I want to change the crop entirely and having more there to work with. Again, the raw materials that I've been talking about, I can refine this differently. I might be able to get multiple images, finished images out of the same shot just because I crop differently of the same image. And then basically this is kind of like just a summary of the things I am thinking about when I approach and I'm taking an image that are easy to forget about. Exposure clipping. Don't overexpose your image. If it's too bright, my camera has the little blinky things that blink in too bright or too dark of areas. So it tells me, hey, your settings are too high. You need to dial things down. I usually do that just through exposure compensation slider, or dial, I should say. But yeah, I'm constantly making sure it's my exposure good. Focal point, where do I want your eye to go? Whatever is sharpest is probably where your eye is going to go. Sharpness and brightness is typically where your eye goes. So, oops, hold on. There we go. In this one, I'm going to focus right here in the middle because that's the subject. That's where I want you to go. So that's what I'm thinking is I approach a flower. What do I want to be in sharp? Do I want the edge of a petal to be sharp? And that's what I want you to focus on, or do I want the center of the flower? Whatever, the side of a flower, whatever. That's my focal. The depth of field, I mentioned, I do the focus bracketing, that helps. But I'm thinking about, do I want the whole flower in focus? Do I just want the tiny little detail that it's pointing at to be in focus? Do I want the edge of the petal to be focused and nothing else? So those are kind of the things I'm considering. And then distractions, that would be things like, especially your backgrounds. Watch your backgrounds. There's no better way to ruin an awesome flower photograph than have a really distracting background. A lot of times my composition is based around the background. What is behind it? Is it bright? Is it, are there stems and sticks and rocks? Rocks can be very bright. You'd be surprised. So you have this like hot spot right behind your flower, those type of things that I want to eliminate. Also, subject accessibility. This usually comes down to, can I reach the flower? And is it in my shadow if it's a sunny day? Because if it can't get in my shadow or I can't reach it, then I'm just not gonna take it. And I'm gonna go focus on the flowers that I can. And that's just how it goes. There's too many flowers out there in the world to worry about it. You can always go find another subject. But I'm not gonna waste my time on the ones that I know are just like too bright or can't get a good angle on. So it goes. And then the last two, light, as I mentioned, sun hitting it. If it's a nice overcast day, rainy days are great, then it's really not a concern. As long as I have enough light, my settings are handling it well enough. Or do I have to use my shadow for everything? And then the wind. The wind sucks. And you never want wind unless you're doing, I guess, ICM type stuff. If it's super windy, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to shoot. If I still want to shoot, I'm going to shoot the flowers that are closer to the ground, or flowers that I can kind of shade with my body to protect them from the wind. I'm definitely not going to be shooting like poppies in the wind, because poppies seem to move no matter if it's windy or not. They're so springy. But you can shoot tulips that are coming. They're still emerging because they're still surrounded by their leaves. They don't move too much. You can shoot those in the wind, in the rain. I've shot those in a rainstorm. It's awesome. So yeah, those are kind of my considerations. And then this tip, so let me look at time here. I still think I got like 15 minutes, unless I'm blowing my time here. Let's say maybe 10 minutes. I'm not even going to use that much, but instead of just like reading this, I figure I'd just real quick show you an edit of what I do for a flower. And this was taken recently at the Garfield Conservatory. They had their flowers show. I think it's over by now, but I actually don't know for sure. But anyways, took it there, pansy. And I figured I'd show you real quick what I do. So first things first, I tend to shoot mine not in Adobe Color. I shoot them in Adobe Standard. I've just found that works well for my camera, for the Sony cameras. It's a very kind of flat look to it. These profiles change, the image. This makes it much more vibrant and pops out. I just like standard. I will say I'm starting to play with adaptive color, which is really cool. And if you've not tried it, I recommend it. Adobe uses its like AI capabilities to basically make a whole bunch of adjustments behind the scenes, but not change any of your sliders. It uses like invisible tables, I think is what they call them. And you can get pretty good photo just by changing it to adaptive color. So suddenly, that was the original image, and that's just changing the adaptive color. It does some pretty cool stuff just with that one slider. So consider that. But like, I'll stick with standard, what I usually would do. So the very first thing that I would look at is my histogram. And I'd notice that there's a little pocket here as far as before I hit pure white. So I would go into tone curve and I would just boost this up until, see how these arrows are popping up? That means I'm clipping. My shadows are clipping and my whites are clipping, and I don't want any clipping. So I back it off just a little to there. And now I've got my brightness basically set. And then I like texture at about 25. I like texture over clarity or dehaze. It brings out detail without making it look kind of funky. Oh, I didn't do white balance. This was daylight, so I could either do day. Well, it was indoors, so this one's kind of weird. I usually try daylight. Honestly, I'd probably just go with auto for now. And if I wanted to tweak it more, I'd tweak it more. But that's a good starting point. And then, oh, you'll notice changing the white balance actually changed my exposure. That's why I would have normally done that first. I forgot to. There we go. Close enough. So yeah, so then your standard, maybe bring up the shadows a little bit. Like I said, my blacks are clipping. If you hit J, it might show it. They don't really show, so it's not too concerning. You can hit the J key, and then these boxes get a box around them. And if you do that, then notice how this blue, that's showing what is clipped, what is turned into completely black. So I can tell where it's gone completely black, and that's fine. And that's really about all I do in the basic panel. What I next do is I actually like to play with the calibration. And I know I kind of talked about this in the past, but I think this is like great secret sauce of messing with stuff. Boosting blue just makes things vibrant almost all the time. I'd like to push it to about 25. You can go further if you want to get crazy. But I would probably do that. And then I play with the hues. I've gotten really into playing with the hues and like pushing the green to the right, pulling the blue into the teals, and then sometimes pushing the red more into the orange. And if I do the little eyeball here to show you before and after, see, it just makes that color pop a little bit in the middle. Right in here, especially this oranges and the pinks, they pop more when you kind of play with that. So this is totally experiment, play with it, find what you like. If you hate it, you just double click one of these and it resets it back. Play with the eye thingy to see, did I go crazy and it looks terrible, that type of thing. So I mess with calibration, and then I mess with color grading. I love color grading. I love it for two reasons. One, I like to make my shadows bluer, just the style that I like. I like to make my midtones warmer to kind of counteract that coolness that I just gave it. And then I like to play with the luminance sliders. The midtones, sometimes I want to raise them up to make it brighter. Sometimes I want to bring them down to make it more muted. I would say this one doesn't need a lot of adjustment. But then the shadows, you can give it that like almost matte look. You can do this in the tone curve panel also. You'll probably get a more controlled version that way. But if I just push this up, it kind of gives it that hazy matte look. And that's because what it's doing, if you watch the histogram, it's literally taking all your blacks and like forcing them to get lighter. So anything that's too dark, the farther I push the slider, the more it removes black entirely and makes it just like gray. But it gives it a softer look. So if you're looking for that softer painterly type dreamy look, that's kind of like a quick and dirty way of doing it. And I like to usually give a little bit of that, maybe not max, but a little bit of that just to soften it up. And sometimes I'll even come back and like add a little more contrast back into it with the dehaze after the fact. But you kind of see what we're going for here. And then I would actually crop this to just a little tighter. Try to get this stem or on this line kind of more on the third, get the center point closer to a third. more balanced out this way. Drop it down just a little. You can see I actually did take this image a bunch of times, as you see in the film thread here. This one was at f4, f4, f4 as I was playing with it, making sure I hit the focus. Then I went to f6 for the one I was just editing. I don't think I shot this one at f8 because at f6 I can already tell the background's getting busy. So f8 would have been pointless. And I just didn't shoot at f2.8 because I think I was afraid everything would be too blurry. Oh yeah, and I would probably I'd strain this a little bit. So I did this edit the other day to see what I would do. So this was how I edited it yesterday. Here's how I edited it today. They're not exactly the same, but you get the idea. Oh, I probably add a vignette and then I got boosted brightness because I made things darker. That's kind of what I do in an edit. And I'd sharpen. I always sharpen. It's the last thing I do. I'd sharpen. And if you've never done in Lightroom, set your sharpening whatever you like. I like 80, which is kind of high, but you always want to come in the masking, hold down the Alt if you're on Windows or Option key if you're on a Mac, drag this over and you'll see this black and white image, and whatever's white is what it's sharpening. By default, it sharpens your whole image, which really is kind of defeating the purpose. But if you do this, now you see only what it's going to sharpen. It's going to sharpen all those edges and make it, sharper. And then I have my finished image. And that's pretty much what I do. Rinse and repeat. I don't know, I got 443 images in this group. I have barely done any of them in here. But I'll basically do that to all my images. I might get into the color mixer if I feel crazy, if there's something I really want to mess with. But usually I handle it with color grading. I handle it with calibration. And then just my basic panels. And that's it. It's really not a ton of edits that I do to my images, unless then I throw it into Lightroom and I clean up any spots. This one doesn't really have any spots. I might take out this little bump here if I wanted to smooth it out, this bump here if I wanted to smooth out in Photoshop with the removal tool, but that's it. So I think that's it for me for like presentation wise. So if you guys got questions, I think I'm sitting on like 56 minutes, so go for it.
Ian, on the one that you just showed us,
yeah,
earlier you talked about you're not afraid of noise, and you were at 6400.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is your only noise correction then in your sharpening, or do you ever denoise?
No, that's a good point. I didn't do it on this one for demonstration purposes. I would definitely at 6400, even though, on the screen, this probably doesn't look that noisy. If I go into 100, like there's some noise in here, and Zoom's probably making this miserable to tell, but there is some noise in here. So I would say anything that I shoot, probably 2000 or above, ISO 2000 or above, I would go in here and I would run the denoise, and I find denoise at 25 usually does the trick. If you do too much of this denoise, it gets muddy. You do start to lose detail. 25, 50 at most if it's a really noisy image, and usually I save that for like landscape stuff or like those photos that I took of the art museum exhibit where they were just blob kind of things anywhere. I didn't have much detail in those. Then I didn't care. But the flowers, I tend to do 25. It's a little bit of a slow process. I have a M1 Max Pro, I think, or M1 Max, whatever, like a 3-year-old MacBook that's pretty beefy. So it does this pretty quick. If you have an older computer, it is kind of slow. You do need an internet connection, which is really annoying if you're traveling and you're not on the internet and you want to edit some photos and you want to go do denoise. It won't work if you don't have the internet. So make sure you have an internet connection. But then it does take out a lot of the noise that was in here and kind of smooths it out, which is then ultimately still kind of brought back through the texture, but it's not noise at that point. So then this is nice and sharp and smooth at the same time. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Ian, you said that you use sharpen for everything. I always use
Yep.
unsharp masking. Do you know what the difference is?
What are you talking about? Masking?
Whenever I finish a photo, I
Mhm.
always finish with unsharp masking. What's the difference between, or maybe you don't know and I should look
I
it
don't
up
know
or
what
try.
an unsharp masking is.
It's the old way that photographers used to do things
Oh,
when
are
they
you
were
like
working with a camera
are you like
in photos.
sharpening or unsharpening the parts that you don't want sharp, right? You're like masking
I'm
in.
not, but listening to you just talking about sharpening got me to thinking, well, I just habitually for the last 15 years or more have used unsharp masking, and I'm just going, well, what the heck is the difference?
I've
So
never heard
I
of
guess I'm
unsharp
gonna have,
masking. I'll be upfront. I've just never heard of it.
okay,
So I'm not entirely
well,
sure what
then
the
I
process
guess,
is, but this is what I do. I actually have a preset set to sharpen at 80, and then I come over and
okay,
I do the masking thing because I don't want everything to be sharpened at 80 because now it's going to be like super crispy and there's going to be like all this again, it's hard to
okay.
see on Zoom, I'm sure, but like I can see like artifacts from the sharpening versus when I tone it down to like here, it doesn't add all those. Now this is still smooth, but the edges are sharp, and that's what I want because I want the edges to be sharp so it pops.
All right. Well, so I have homework then. Thanks a lot.
Yeah,
I'm going to,
this is probably the number one with sharpening. Like people don't know to do the masking part, and it's really helpful.
yeah, well, yes. So I'm going to look at the difference just between the sharpen and the unsharp masking because I
Yeah.
habitually just unsharp mask. I don't even think about it anymore. And I'm going, well, what the hell? Maybe I should. Thank you.
No
Well,
problem.
unsharp mask is a pretty old process that we really haven't been using for the last 5 or 10 years. Ellen,
Well,
so,
there you go.
yeah,
I'm a
yeah.
pretty old person.
Yeah, a long time ago, it was a great way to sharpen your images because it sharpened the edges, but
Yeah.
it's been replaced by a lot of other good ways of sharpening.
Okay. So old dog, new tricks. I will look into that.
That's how it goes. You're just constantly, tweaking your process.
Yeah. Okay.
I do all this editing totally differently than I used to, So I've learned
Yeah.
things. Like I said, I think it was this week I learned about the adaptive color profile. So now I need to go play with that, and it's impressive.
Okay.
Just by
Uh,
doing that, you'll probably end up with a pretty good image. It's impressive what it does. So,
all right. Thank you.
yep. Any other questions?
Yes. When do you do the denoise in your process? Early on or late or when?
When I remember is probably the best way to put it. I believe Adobe recommends doing it earlier than later before all your edits. So realistically, the earlier you do it, the better is kind of the answer. I I don't know if I'm the pixel peeping type to tell you that if I did it just now here at the end and then I went back and I did it at the beginning, would I really notice a huge difference? Probably not. Um, so the answer is when I remember. I mean, I just did it here at the end. I wouldn't be like, shoot, I did it at the end. I have to undo all my stuff, denoise it, then redo all my stuff. No, I would just do the denoise and call it a day and move on to the next image. So if I can remember to do it before sharpening, I try to do that. Let's go with that. Sharpening, you usually do at the very end. Although that's a rule I break all the time also. It's not gonna make or break your image if you do sharpening early on. Trust me, you're not gonna notice a huge difference. Any other questions? Right, I will stop sharing. hopefully that was helpful and informative and entertaining.
Gosh.
Wonderful
Kind
person.
of a brain dump, to be honest. I mean, that is what I think of. That's what I've learned through doing it for 5 years, plus all the photography I did before doing flowers. But that's really like, if you're to stand next to me in a garden, those are the things I'm thinking about. Those are techniques I'm using. If you're editing next to me, that's how I edit. Figure I'd share what I've learned over the course of time here.
Ian, thank you. I learned so much just on so many different levels, from your editing to the way you shoot.
Feel free to ask questions anytime. You know, we're at Shady Lane. When we go to Shady Lane, you know, if you got questions or you need help with something, come grab me. Like, you won't be bothering me. I love talking about this stuff.
You know, just a real quick question on that. I understand about you shooting in the shade. I get that, but when you're indoors, is the
Mhm.
6400 good enough to get you the light that you want indoors with no additional light?
Yeah, I shoot the whole Shady Lane will be shot handheld up to ISO 8000. The Orchid Show in Chicago, I shoot at ISO 8000. Almost all my orchid shots were taken at ISO 8000. Actually, I take that back. You'd be surprised how many of those, because I'm usually shooting at f2.8, f4 most of the time anyway, so you're capturing a lot of light that way. Sensors are getting better and better these days, to where they don't need so much light in the first place. Rarely, I mean, it's got to be like the sun's got to be going down for me to really have an issue.
Thank you very
Mhm.
much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Excellent.
Okay. You know, with that, Jeff, before we get into like Patty's slideshow, would you like to go over any updates with Wacko and PSA?
Well, Wacko, we have our spring competition on Saturday, where we pick the final medal images. So if anybody wants to see that, let me know and I can give you the Zoom link for that. Otherwise, anybody that's entered, I've already emailed the Zoom link twice to them. But if you can't find it, email me again and I'll be glad to send it out. We really don't have anything else going on with Wacko. We're in a transition period right now, with new people taking over the program area, so we don't have anything new going on. We probably have a sunflower shoot later in August this year, probably the same place we did last year. PSA, the middle of the month, they are going to Dubuque, Iowa, from a Friday till Sunday. Lots of different things to shoot in Dubuque. People a lot of times think Dubuque is a boring little place, but it's actually sort of got a lot of fascinating things to photograph, and middle of May should be a really nice time to be there. You do need to be a member of PSA, and then you can join the PSA chapter membership. And that's the last thing that they do for their season. They take the summer off and they won't start up till November. And that's about it. Yep.
Okay. Anything with Digital Forum?
Yeah, Digital Forum in this month, April. We're into April, aren't we? I have Chris Scott talking about On1 Photo Raw software. Basically, the basics of using it for people that are looking for a different alternative to Lightroom and Photoshop. On1 pretty much can do a lot of the same things that Lightroom and Photoshop does, but in different way, definitely a different way. So we've got Chris on next month. I'm trying to think who I have after that. Let me see if I've got that. Yeah. Then I have Nicole Brennan talking about photographing the night sky. Basically the basics of photographing Milky Way. So she should be sort of interesting. And it's always nice since we're starting the season for photographing the Milky Way again. Once you get into the warm season, it's always seems to be a little easier to photograph. June, Jim Karofsky may be doing something. We're working with him on how to light a photograph or process it. I don't have anything for July. In August, I have Jamie Konarski Davidson talking about lens babies. And we're working on that. That's basically a set of lenses that people can put on their camera. They reached out, they're trying to connect with camera clubs and different groups. So we might even have them on our club meeting. We're getting a bunch of different companies starting to reach out to the clubs to talk to us about stuff. So we will see. So that's all I've got,
Okay.
I think.
Patty, would you like to do your slideshow presentation, please?
Yeah. Let me. Yeah, it's not a slideshow. I'm just going to be flipping pictures around here.
Acceptable.
Okay. Okay, so you see coneflowers?
Yep.
Okay, cool. All right, so let me move the people so I can find the little arrow to advance. Put you guys on the other side. There we go. Okay, so welcome to the Patty Show. I'm just got a collection of just various photographs that I took over the last year or so. And I think this is one that I took. I think I took this when we were at the sunflower place, or else I took it. I don't even know where. But anyway, there's that. And then this is my, I'm not sure if this is a dandelion. I think it's like a similar flower, but it's not really a dandelion. I call this one Ra, because it looks like a cheerleader. And then I did a senior photo shoot last fall with my coworker Tammy's son. Super neat kid. He was a lot of fun. I really like him. And things started out really awkward at first, and then he put on this hat and he changed his entire personality, became somebody else, and all of a sudden was a supermodel. So it was great. So there's one of the shots without the hat. And this is the one they're actually using for the yearbook. And then he's into bowling, so I had him put the bowling ball on a picnic table and crouch down behind it. And that was a lot of fun to shoot. And then here he is with his hat again, being Mr. Cool. I got this moment with his dad. They had kind of a fun relationship. They kind of butt heads a little bit. So that but very playful. And then here he is with his trombone. He's trying to look like a jazz musician. And this is in that little corridor in West Bend, where they've got the stairway between the buildings, and they put the strings of lights in there. And if you look through the corridor, you see the little silver bird at the other end. And then there's the lights reflecting in the trombone. And orchid show. Yeah, like Ian said, I look for the characters, and this reminded me of like a little alien with a big eye, and kind of an ET looking thing. And then there's the little curl that you always look for. And there's another. And this funky little one petal sticking out. Ah, oh my God, what happened there? Hold on. It went nuts. Where did we go? Okay, so anyway, more orchids. A bed. I like these kind of spiky looking things, and they had really cool backgrounds with different lighting and screens and stuff and a lot of color. And this one was kind of cool. And these, I think these look like little pink ladies. There's little blonde little faces there, and then they've got like a pink dress on. Then this one is, who knows? It's very exotic. Then they had petals and patterns on the floor in front of these doors. And I just kind of did like a couple of flat lay type images there. There's one of the other ones with sand and petals. And this one I call strut because to me it looks like it's doing a walk down the catwalk, and its feet are those big buds. And then here's one that's kind of nestled in the leaf. And this reminds me of those things that you see hanging at the back of pickup trucks. Then another spiky plant. This one I call cat's pajamas because they look like they're little spotted cats. And then this one had kind of a watercolory look to it. And this is my favorite picture that I took, the whole orchid show. I like the colors, the orange and the purple are complementary, and I had to take it at a weird angle because I'm watching the background, and it was the only way I could get a clean background was to tip it at an angle. Otherwise it would have been horrible. And this reminds me of like a murmuration of birds in flight and formation. And I thought I took this one out of there. This is from one of the owls from the Schlitz Audubon. It's an older picture though. This is an older picture too, but I like it. It reminds me of those fashion magazines where they show two actresses wearing the same dress, and you're supposed to discuss who wore it best. So they've got two ladies that show up at a party in the same dress, and yeah, they're facing off a little bit here. And this was last year's orchid show. There was a little girl eating her lunch sitting on the floor. She was really cute. And there were her mother's feet were in there. And I used the AI feature to take out mom's feet and fill in the background. You'd never know that she was right there next to the kid. So it turned out pretty good. And this is a duck at the zoo that was swimming around in the tank of water, and it's up periscope. And same duck flapping its wings and spraying water everywhere. And any excuse to show spider pictures. So this is Bambi. And this is Brody the rock star. This is a bird that I took a while back. Just got in there. This one is Jagger. Jagger doesn't look like this at all anymore. This is a baby picture. And now it's about a 7-inch hairy red spider. And this is a baby picture of Maisel, named after J. Maisel. Oops. Okay, and this is Mamie. And this one is Pandora. And this is Poppy. This is the one that escaped in my house, of course. So, but I caught her right away before there was any mayhem. And this is Samara, named after the little hairy wet girl in the ring. And she's got kind of a little bit of a personality, I guess you would say. And this is my curly hair Stephanie. And this is one of my original 5 tarantulas, Taco. And another one of my original 5, this is Tucker. And am I done? I think I'm done. So I will stop sharing.
Patty,
Oh,
these spiders would not get along with each other, right?
not for
Or
very
would they?
long. You'd end up with one fat spider at the end of the day.
Patty, your photos were
Okay.
great. But when you said original 5, how many are there?
Yeah, my first
now?
day of tarantula keeping, I came home with 5. And that I'm trying to limit myself to around 40 at the maximum, just because I like to spend time feeding them and watching them. And if you get too many, it just becomes a chore, and you just you just drop in crickets and move on to the next one. So I like to sit there and watch them eat and, talk to them and stuff. So
I think you're very courageous. There's no way that I lose things. So I'm sure mine would be in the walls and God knows where
oh my
else.
God.
So
I was so freaking out when Poppy got out. Number one, it's an old world tarantula that's an OBT, which stands for orange bitey thing, and they have medically significant venom. And they have big fangs and they're not afraid to use them. And I was like so freaked out, and I thought he was dead. He'd laid there in the same position for 3 days. I tapped on the glass. I tilted the enclosure sideways. I was checking on him with a flashlight, and I'm like, shoot, he's dead. He's an old male, so they don't live very long. And so I'm like, okay, so I take the lid off, and no precautions whatsoever because it's a dead freaking spider. So I'm pulling out his plant, and I'm pulling out his water bowl, and I reach in and start to pull out the cork bark, and all of a sudden he came back to life and ran up the side, over the top, down the side, across the kitchen table, onto the floor and under the table. And I didn't even have a catch cup because I wasn't expecting I would need one. So I had to run in the other room and get a catch cup and then go back with a flashlight and try to find him.
Sounds
has a
like
lot of-
a meatball that came off of a spaghetti.
well, he has a lot of patience if he was waiting for you to take that cover off so he could
Oh my
make his
gosh. Yeah, a
grapes.
lot of people, a lot of the tarantula people said, that his plot worked. Yeah, he'd been planning that for days. So he's back in his box and he's still alive. I caught him in the catch cup, and I just put him and the cup and everything together back in the enclosure, put the lid on. He was freaked out. I was freaked out. and there was enough space at the bottom of the cup that he could squeeze out when he got calmed down. So I just left the cup in there until he went back into hiding. And then I very carefully removed the lid, pulled the cup out and slammed the lid shut. So that this is the one and only escape I've ever had. And it was totally because I took absolutely zero precautions because I thought he was a dead spider. So
That's incredible, Patty. Thank you.
yeah,
Um,
that was fun.
Again, Sid was going to be here, so only Patty was tonight. But as Patty was talking, just update, which I completely forgot to tell everybody. Between Patty, Ellen, Jeff, Pat, and Liz, this month we're going to get together. We're going to talk about those T-shirt designs. So by the time that the May newsletter and meeting comes through, we hope to have for you designs that you can vote on to finalize. We'll have the pricing, and then through Patty's company, they'll have it where it'll be like an online shop, and you can just go in and order the shirts. So that's still to come. It's definitely, we've all kind of had great excuses, which don't matter, but we're coming through with it. So in May, we'll be able to update everybody on that. Jeff, is there anything else? Otherwise, I can do the slideshow for this month, which is on the Shadow and Lights.
Not really. Only thing I was gonna say is I'd like everybody to subscribe to our YouTube channel, so we get more viewers and get that channel a little more well known. Once people start seeing our channel, they may start joining our club. So just go to the YouTube channel. Also, I am probably going to stop putting most of these live videos on our website since they're on our YouTube channel. It's a lot of extra work, and YouTube's made it a little trickier. So I think I'm just going to start directing everybody who wants to watch, last month's video of the meeting, just go to the YouTube channel. And I'll try to put that in the chat for people if they want to find it. I think it's, I got to find the right one. I've got the strange code, but I think it's, like youtube.com/Menomonee Falls Camera Club, something like that. That's really all I've got.
Okay. Well, again, this month it was Lights and Shadows. I appreciate everybody who sent in information. Next month it'll be Boca, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. And Ellen did a fantastic article in this month's newsletter in regards to Boca. So hopefully we'll get a lot of submissions there.
Linnea, thanks a lot to Wikipedia, which kind of comes in handy. All you have to do is edit it, but I did look up some other websites that were probably better for the information, but I figured I'm not really familiar with that. I just know it's fuzzy background, but I'm finding out there's more to it than that.
I know, I agree. I really appreciate the article that you put in. No matter where you got it from, Ellen. I thought it was all you, but that works. Okay, I am ready to share. I've got the share sound. I've got my screen. Let's see if I can make this happen. I'm running out of time to be successful.
No, we're seeing your screen, but not the show. You got the sound though, right? So that was good.
Okay. I am so sorry. I was so impressed with me, but you know what I said by the end of the season? So I've got like 2 more times, correct? Okay, let me try this one more time.
Yeah,
Share. I'm
I
doing
like
this
that.
too. Okay. And you're not seeing it?
Nope, you're not sharing yet.
Oh,
Now you're sharing. Let's see. Yep, yeah, now we're seeing it.
Okay, thank you. Well, and there we have it for April. And that is all I had. Anybody, anything that we missed tonight?
Boy, we're done early for a change.
Any photography questions for any of our experts here, which wouldn't be me? Unless you want to learn how to zoom a movie, then I'm great at.
Boy, what a group tonight.
I would say it's a very quiet night.
Yeah, Randy, why don't you talk about the park that you were telling me about instead of me trying to remember it all?
Okay, Menomonee Park, it's actually one of the greatest migration that comes through. Most of our birds that come through will come through along the Great Lakes and then along the Mississippi, and that's how they split. So they come up along the Great Lakes, and Menomonee Park is kind of down by South Milwaukee, and they get a lot of I've been there. I've seen 10 scarlet tarnagers at one time on a tree, and one time I was there, not last year, but the year before. I actually caught the major migration, and I was standing on top of the cliff, and I was looking at the water, and I mean, it was in the trillions and trillions of birds just flying and just going along the water, and they were popping up and yeah, I mean, you'd see like indigo bunting, scarlet tanagers, just all the different warblers all at once. I mean, sometimes they get 136 species in a day there when you hit it right at the right migration. And it would be end of April, usually by May 17th, it's kind of hard to see it because of the leaves and stuff like that, but it is something to see. But I'd be willing to go down there with a group, or you kind of park by the dog park and then you kind of walk in there in that ways, and you kind of dirt, it's walking paths. A lot of it's hard paved. But there are some that are, dirt paths too, that kind of lead over to the cliff.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah, I can kind of keep you. I used to own a wild bird store, so that's kind of how I know this. And I kind of, well, if you watch Merlin birding, it will yield, a lot of it will be on there when they're starting to see them. But usually it's about the end of April, May 17th, right in that range. And it is pretty spectacular, especially when you start seeing all these scarlet tanagers all at once. It's hard to see one and then to find like 10
Yeah.
or 3.
I've only seen one once and I
I
wasn't
know.
sure what it was.
It was unreal. I couldn't believe all these warblers. And I mean, you just stand in this cliff and they're just going by you. Just groups and groups of all different birds. It was trillions. I'm telling you, it was trillions. It just looked like you'd see the sky would turn clouds like that. It was just going one right out, just waves and waves of bird going by. It's pretty cool. I just hit it at the right time though.
Could you tell us the name again of the place?
It's Warnemont Park.
How do you spell that?
Warnemont Park.
It's just north of Grant Park, where some of the bridges are. It's by Patrick Cudahy. Yeah.
I think there's a golf course there, isn't
Yeah,
there?
there's a golf
Correct.
course there. But you park kind of by the dog park, and then you just take the trail right from there.
Yeah, I used to bicycle through there and that. It's a really nice
So
area.
I got the spelling if you want it. It's Warnimont.
I just put a link to that in the chat.
Oh, okay, good.
So that'll take you to a
But
map.
I mean, usually go down there a few times because when you start getting the migrations, you can pick days you'll see 100 species easily.
Question, is there only about a week or a 2-week window? How long do you think?
Yeah, what happens is it's not so much the trees start to leaf off, so it's harder to see them.
Okay.
Kind of the end of April is better than once you start getting into May, then it starts to get, the leaves, it's hard to see the birds because they're, if you know warblers, they're always dancing around. But you can get pretty close because there's so many of them that they're all of a sudden you'll be standing on the trail and you'll have 4 or 5 different species just all around you. But it is pretty good. Another Lions Den Park is another good place to go see that again along the lake. That's more up by Port Washington, Lions Den.
Yeah, Mequon, Port Washington.
But as they come in, they'll go along the lakes and then they start heading east. Like they'll head in or west, I'm saying, west into Lake Horicon. And then at the same time, the birds are going up the Mississippi. And then you're getting the western species and the eastern species, and they'll split along the Mississippi River. So along both of that areas are very good birding areas to see birds. Anything along the Lake Michigan, the Great Lakes, and then the Mississippi River during the peak migration. It's amazing all these birds do that too. I helped one time at River Edge band birds, and we caught a bird. It was a morning warbler that they had caught 5 years prior, 10 feet from when they caught it. originally, and that bird put on like 10,000 miles because it went to Costa Rica every winter, and then ends up 10 feet from where they caught it 5 years prior. Isn't that amazing? And it's just, and they do this every year. It's just like clockwork to them. Amazing little creatures.
Yeah, that's neat. Oh, we'll have to check it out. Everybody should check it out and report back, and then we maybe can work on a field trip sometime. It's so hard because you don't know exactly when they're going to be there. But sounds like it'd be.
What you could do is you look for the winds. So when you know that the winds are going to come off the southeast or southwest, actually favoring more southeast. And if it's strong winds, so if you get a strong southeast wind right around the migration period, birds use the winds. So they'll sit somewhere for days just waiting for that wind flow. And you'll always notice, like orioles or hummingbirds, you'll have a windy day and all of a sudden you'll have 10 orioles in your yard. That's what they're doing. They're not going against the wind. They're going to use the winds, or just like airplanes, they use the winds. So they'll just get up in the strong winds, and that's what they'll do. So you kind of know when it's a windy southerly winds, that's the day to go down there. The next day after that wind, go down there. And that's when you'll see a lot of species. So you can be close. The migration is always about the same time, but they'll wait for the winds. Same thing when they leave. It'll be a strong northwest winds. You'll have hummingbirds in your yard for, end of September. All of a sudden there'll be a strong northwest wind. No more birds. And then all of a sudden the juncos are here. That's how that usually works. So interesting though.
Yeah, it is. I heard we have 2 eagles in Richfield right now that are nesting in Richfield. Somewhere around Hubertus Road, not Hubertus Road, Pleasant Hill and Hillside. And I guess also can't remember what the person told me, if it was blue herons nesting in the trees out there as well. I haven't seen them yet, but of course I leave Richfield and we get a couple eagles come in. Also, we have, beginning of May, the first weekend in May, we have a Revolutionary War at Old Falls Village. If you want to get pictures of people and guns firing and all sorts of different actions and sets, we have that going the first weekend in May, and we'd love to have you guys out there take pictures.
I suppose there'll be good food too.
Yep.
Where is that located?
It's in Menomonee Falls on Pilgrim Road and County Line Road, Q.
Oh, we had our ice cream thing?
Yeah, that's where we'll have our ice cream thing in July. Yeah, Brian, you don't have to worry now. We got rid of doing the food ourselves, and we're now bringing in food trucks.
Good move. Good move.
We've been having fun checking out food trucks. It seems to be the new popular thing these days.
That's what Holy Cross Church does, and that just makes a lot of sense. Gives you a lot of relief from headaches, so.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a lot of options, and then they clean up the mess. You don't have to cook it. You don't have to do anything in that, for the most part.
Yep. Yeah, they take care of all the hard work. We're still serving beer and soda and some low alcoholic drinks. We're checking all that out now.
Oh, it's a
Boy,
pretty quiet night. Too quiet.
Yeah.
We need that thunderstorm to come.
You know, Ian had so many good things, but the one thing that jumped out at me was the idea of holding the camera in your right hand and hold the big hat, you know, to create shade in your left hand. At first I thought that's going to be hard, but I was just practicing that, you know, and I think I can do that. So I don't have to depend on Ken to be my shade anymore. Is Ken still here? I don't see him here.
I say Ken is fired and that no more invitations. No more outings for you, buddy. I found a new buddy. We still love him.
We can't hear you, Roger, if you're talking to us.
I do that a lot on landscapes when I'm shooting towards the sun to reduce lens flare. Hold the hat over the lens.
Yeah. Yeah, it's worth having a hat once in a while.
What's really hard is with lens flare, when you got a filter on it and you're shooting into lights or sun and that, then you get that bouncing.
Yeah, at least Photoshop's getting better at getting rid of lens flare now.
Yeah.
So with the AI stuff.
Oh.
Well, I don't know. I will put a plea out. We are looking for a vice president for the group. Elizabeth Whitcomb will become president next year. So I will be starting to make phone calls again. So anybody that might be willing could save some time and let me know. I'm hoping Ellen wants to keep going as a newsletter person for another year. It pays so well to help fix her mound system. She had to say something about mount systems because now mine's gone too.
Yeah, it's a burial ground. I'm going to turn it into something that's pay-per-view and put up artifacts and hieroglyphics and charge people to see our jeepers cripes. They're expensive. So anyway, we'll get through it as soon as the ground determines that it's warm enough to put it in. So it's like I'm living in 1801.
It's funny. I talked to my relative up in Michigan, Upper Peninsula, and they've had that ice storm and that they were without power. There was like 180,000 some people without power up in the UP. So that's more than half the people up in the UP was without power. But the roads were icy. Yeah. Even my cousin's like, yeah, the ice is still hanging off the trees today.
Wow.
We have a place in Rhinelander, and we just found out that the power is back on. But you know, if you're not up there, you don't know the power went off. So, that's the good news. But we're real good at conserving water here. So if you want any tips on that sometime, be more than glad to share. So done with that. Done.
I don't know. Is Pat still here? He disappeared. I'll check with him to see if he'll stay as treasurer. So we're really just looking for a vice president. So it's an easy job. The first year as vice president. President gets a little harder, but it's not all that hard, right, Linnea?
It's the darn screen sharing. Yeah,
That'll get you every time.
Again, 2 more meetings and I will master it, I think. I try.
I think the vice president is probably going to have to show that they will be able to screen share. So they have a whole year as vice president to learn that.
Well, the other job too is to fetch pizza for the Christmas party.
Yep.
Yeah,
Oh, we
that's the more
found two
important
guys
job.
to do it. Yeah. I think we
I saw
found a
Tony
couple
raise
of
his hand as
members
volunteering.
who will fetch pizza for us. Clint and who else was it that went and got the pizza?
Pat and myself and that.
Pat?
That worked out really great.
Yeah.
We saved like
Next
a ton
time
of
we'll
money too.
Yeah, I bet you guys got big tips, huh?
Yeah, no tips in that. It would have been nice, but yeah, I think we saved like $50.
Wow.
But I could be mistaken.
Yeah, it might be worth checking into that more. Who knows?
Yeah. And really, I mean, it's only, I don't even think 2 miles away. And that, or right at 2 miles. It's real close. I mean, it took like 5 minutes to get over there, if that.
Going what, to Papa Murphy's or?
No, that was Papa John's.
Papa John's. Yeah, too many Papas. Okay.
Yeah, the Papa Murphy's, you got to cook it yourself.
Yeah.
I don't think they got enough oven space there at the church to cook all that. Okay, our first pizza's done. It's gonna take another half hour for the other one. You have to have a slumber party at the.
At least get a Papa John's food truck, that'll take care of it.
Yeah. Yeah, can we get a food truck next time? And that
we might be. I heard of a food truck that's doing pizzas, or someplace. We're checking it out. They do have a stone brick pizza in their truck or something. Stone brick thing for cooking pizzas, but
yeah,
you never know.
Yeah, not sure about during winter and that, but
yeah.
I suppose with the right amount of money, they'll show up.
Yeah. They may not want to do it for, 10 or 12 pizzas and all.
For the $100 a pizza, they will.
They probably couldn't pump them out as fast as we'd like if.
No.
Yeah.
Brian,
bad. We talk about everything but photography here.
The church has been very accommodating for our group. Are they're okay with our handling of cleanup and leaving the place as it was?
We've been doing a good job. It takes a little bit of encouragement here and there, clean this off, but we've been doing a good job, and they're very welcoming, and the fact that they invited us back, for a couple of different events says that they're very happy having us, and
okay.
I think it's no, they're very open to outside nonprofit groups. Any nonprofit group, they're very welcoming, and
okay, and we certainly are nonprofit.
Yeah, and I've had a good relationship with the people there, and so they've been very, very supportive.
Good.
Well, I feel honored that we are, able to use that facility. I call it that beautiful church. So they do a great job, fantastic job, really.
And if we're lucky, I might have the photo done before the next Christmas party. So
I messed it up that bad for you, Jeff? That you're trying to recover that picture?
That's right. I think I keep asking Jeff if there's any news on the group photo.
Yeah, I just haven't had time to work on it, and it's getting rid of the busy background. That's always the hardest part. So AI hasn't yet come to the rescue for getting rid of heads that are blend with the same color as the background. Everybody's hair is too close to that background color. So
you got some headless people?
Yeah.
Or hairless?
And maybe could be something I could have some fun with maybe fireworks coming out of people's heads or something. I don't know.
Like a fountain, fire fountain, whatever.
I may end up just fixing it up and sending it out just the way it is because
Please do.
it takes too much time sometimes to do something creative with it. But
We'll take it as
Well,
best you could do, Jeff.
Patty, maybe we should look at having like knit caps with the Camera Club logo on it. We could wear all the
there you go.
caps for the logo. That way Jeff wouldn't have problems with hair blending in as long as we made it a vibrant color,
We can
festive,
accommodate that.
so to speak.
We'll get it. It's just takes some time, but yeah, season's almost over. That's the funny part. Well, Lene, it's 9 o'clock. You want to call it?
You could always run a 2024 and then take a picture like early on next year and run the two of them together to see how we've aged.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was yours we've had, Ellen. Nope. Everybody, thank you very much for joining us. No field trips until we see you in May at the meeting, and then right afterwards is the Shady Lane field trip, correct?
Yeah, I think Shady Lane is May 10th.
All right.
Yes, we can pull the bird thing together.
The what? I'm sorry?
So unless we can pull the bird thing together.
Which should be cool. I would be game for Port Washington more so than South Milwaukee if anybody is game further north. But yeah, to be continued. Jeff, if we want to reach out to everybody, is best place is everybody on Facebook to put a message out, or
There's a fair amount, or you let me know and I can email everybody.
okay, sounds good.
I think myself and Ellen are the two that have all the emails. Well, Pat does too, but
Yeah, and I think I do somewhere.
yeah,
All
it's a
right.
constantly changing thing.
Okay, well, we'll get it. Anybody's interested in doing a field trip, even spur of the minute, reach out to one of us and we can get the word out because it's fun.
Yep.
So, all right, you guys take care. See you in a month.